You getting excited to come down here or what?
I am, man. I'm fired up.
So what, 2 weeks now? Let's see, 14th, just about.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be in like the Fort Myers area, the 31st. But I'll be in Florida the 29th, 30th.
Cool. Yeah, my brother's coming down next week. So reactivate. What's that called?
What?
Voltron reactivate. You probably don't know what Voltron is, do you?
No, I wasn't a nerd growing up.
Or like Transformers, the ones that all transform into their respective weaponry and then become a one giant thing.
Respective weaponry?
Yeah. Yeah, like one guy like turns into a gun, the other one's like the leg of the big
respective weaponry. I want to hear one of the actors in the movie say that.
Welcome to the Move with Motus Podcast. My name is Dr. Christopher Ellis, and joining me is personal trainer John Williams. We are the owners of Motus Personal Training and Physiotherapy. Together, we will discuss any topic you can think of when it comes to training and rehab. From the carnivore diet to hip impingement, you can be sure that all your questions will be answered. Enjoy this week's episode. Moving on. So, okay, yeah, I kind of want to talk about plantar fasciitis. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely do too. And I didn't read your blog, but I saw the title for it. Can flip-flops help with plantar fasciitis? I believe that was the title, correct? Something like that.
Yeah, and I have a theory that it could.
I'm interested in that because I would almost think it's the inverse, but I'd like to hear, because I think we've spoken about this in the past, because I'm thinking like, okay, you're scrunching up your toes all the time. That might be an issue. But at the same time, when you go to toe off anyway, as long as if you have good toe mechanics, you're scrunching your toe down anyway, right? You're plantar flexing. So
yeah, and I think it's so funny in like the medical and physical therapy world. There's so much stuff out there that's dogma that you just say. You're like, oh, you can't wear flip-flops. That's so bad for you. You need support. You need, and the more I've like been in this profession and more I've gone down, like, well, let me back up. I have to say, once you transition out of like the insurance world and start doing your own thing, you feel this need to deliver better products. You want to learn more, but more than that, you develop like time, right? Because when you're a physical therapist in the insurance world, it's like you're seeing 30 patients a day or whatever it is, and you're just trying to survive your day. By the end of the day, you're just burnt out. So you're not really, like, unless you're a total nerd, which I kind of am, you're not really seeking out new information. You're just going through the process, going through the motions. I imagine that's pretty similar to a lot of medical doctors. I don't know, but a lot of them are seeing 50 patients a day, and they're probably also just trying to survive their day.
and you'd rather just tell people when they have foot pain, just put this insole in, just go, just like wear this shoe, go do this. And I don't want to spend time on the hard stuff, and I don't want to think about it more because I'm not interested in that problem, which is fair. You don't have to be interested in every problem. But we have definitely accepted solutions that are not correct simply because we're too lazy to know more.
Yeah, or maybe it's just not enough time, or and I think that the patient matters too, right? So if you have like a high-end athlete versus a sedentary gentleman or a little old lady who just wants to feel better, I think your approach is definitely going to change. Depends on their goals, So I definitely think that making your arch stronger is the way to go. But if my grandma just wanted to feel better, I probably wouldn't put her through a whole foot strengthening program and say, just wear this, it'll be better,
Yeah, so let's back up so we can tell people sort of what plantar fasciitis is, and maybe they can self-diagnose themselves while we're sitting here.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about something. So plantar fasciitis is fairly common, actually. It shouldn't be, but it's fairly common. And bunions are fairly common. I think we spoke about bunions.
Yes.
In a previous episode.
Yes.
We're a society that has a lot of plantar fasciitis and a lot of bunions, but we keep wearing the same shoes over and over again, which is just hilarious to me.
Doesn't that tell you some of the dogmas might be wrong,
Yeah, and we're also all underslept and we all drink caffeine. So there's another one.
Yeah, you got a big problem with caffeine. You hate caffeine.
I do have. It's one of those things like anytime you have new knowledge of something, you see everything differently. right?
Uh-huh.
Like you have new knowledge of something. So you look at the habit that you've had of that thing. Now it's this negative thing and you can't go back anymore. Sometimes the best thing you can do for breaking a habit is just learning more about the habit that you have, learning how destructive it is over the long term.
All right, so I got a weird thought. So, um, so
We'll talk about plantar fasciitis in a second,
Wait.
but I do want to hear what you're going to say.
So I always like picture like elephants in like the Serengeti, and they're just like they got like flies on their back and all the time. They're always, they're squirting water trying to get it off. And I think at a certain point they're like, well, I gotta live with flies on my back. I think that's what it's like to be a human with certain things. I think we have our vices. Like, well, I'm just gonna. I kept trying to quit caffeine. Well, no, that's my flies in the back. I'm always gonna be drinking coffee.
It's so true.
Just
you think of a cow
it.
with the fly on the ear. It's the same thing. Yeah, that's just my fly.
I don't know. Weird thought.
Man, I love that. I gotta start saying that to more people. It's so true. But plantar fasciitis, why don't you describe it for the people?
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I learned. And then I've also learned new information. That's why I'm so excited about this. Because the information I learned.
New knowledge.
Yeah, new knowledge. Update. And that's the way it should be. We should constantly be updating. So what we learned is it's an itis, fasciitis. Itis means inflammation in Latin, right? So inflammatory process is what we learned. We learned a flat foot or a super high arch can cause it. And so, initially getting out of school, I did the things we were taught, rest it, ice, compress it, elevate it. Well, it turns out all that stuff is pretty much wrong.
I have been on a tear with icing recently.
I saw your ice post, and so have I.
I had a tweet that like blew up. It got like 100,000 they got like 150,000 impressions, and I was going back and forth with people. It was madness, but
yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people telling you you're crazy, right? I mean, it's another dogmatic thing.
Honestly, man, to be fair, 95% were ATCs and like people with their master's degrees in athletic training, all supportive.
Good. So I think
I got like 500 followers from it just because people were just liked what I had to say. But continuing on.
Yeah, I think the word's finally getting out that ice is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I know you interviewed him, and so did I, Gary Reinl, and I mean he makes.
You interviewed him?
Yeah, I did. He did like an hour podcast, and on my Dynamic Naples podcast. Yeah, he makes a perfectly strong case for why I shouldn't ice. I'll dip really quickly into that because that's not what we meant to talk about, but it is kind of relevant. So what I love about his line of thinking, which makes 100% sense, is that there is a difference between inflammation and swelling, right? So those gets lumped together. Everyone thinks just inflammation bad, swelling bad. Well, his thinking is inflammation is step one of the healing process, which is absolutely true. That's the white blood cells going to an area, flooding the area to repair it, right? So why would you block that? The swelling is sort of the sequelae. It's the leftover bits. It's like the cleanup crew comes and then all the, like picture a crash on the highway that you want the cleanup crew to come. You want the cops, everyone to come there. But then the swelling is like the fragments of vehicles left over. And, it's the byproduct. So that's the part.
I really like that framework.
Yeah. That's the byproduct. That's the stuff you want to mitigate and manage. And through movement, because that stuff is in the lymphatic system. Basically, it moves out through the lymphatic system, which does not have a pump like your blood vessels. It doesn't have a heart. It requires movement to get out of there. So pain-free movement's the key. Anyways, so yeah, I really like that. It makes perfect sense. So going back to plantar fasciitis, so there's already a problem with the fasciitis thing. We'll get to in a minute, but no, actually, let's start there because then the rest of what I'm going to say is going to make more sense. So I listened to a podcast with Aaron Horschig. He's the guy who does Squat University.
Yeah.
And love his podcast, by the way. So big shout out to him because this is his interview with Dr. Ray McClanahan, who is a podiatrist in the running niche. I think this is all Ray McClanahan's work. He had a mentor, Harvey Lamont, did this study on people with plantar fasciitis. And he was also a dermapathologist, meaning he can study tissues under a microscope. So he had this whole population of people, all different ages, different sexes, and he basically was doing fasciotomies, like removing part of the fascia. That's one of the procedures that's done for people who can't really resolve it with conservative methods. So he took 50 samples, again, all varied different age, different sex, different backgrounds, and examined them under the microscope and found that there was zero of those 50 samples had inflammation in the fascia. What he did find, what it was necrotic. So the tissue was actually dead.
Wow.
Which is really interesting, right? So
that is fascinating.
Yeah. So his line of thinking is there is an artery that feeds into the fascia, and on top of that artery sits the abductor hallucis, I believe it is. Yes. So that's the muscle.
The big toe.
Yes, the big toe. It moves the big toe outward. So if you move, and I found another study, if you push the big toe into the other direction to adduction, so like, sort of
like pushing your toes together,
pushing your big toe towards your second toe, you cut off instantly your blood supply by like 60%.
Whoa.
Yeah. Right.
So the reason, I just want to speak for a second, sort of pull back. The reason this is kind of blowing my mind a little bit is because we had a podcast where we talked about bunions, and we talked about how certain ways of life cause these bunions to happen. We get these big things like right behind our big toe, and then it squishes our big toe and it pushes it in towards all the other toes. And I know this is where you're going. And I'm just picturing so many people's issues with that and how all of these things tie in together. So if this is you, or if this is somebody who has either a bunion, or you can just see their big toe just pushed into all the other toes, you can see where Chris is going to go after this, and this is definitely what they're suffering from.
So, and we'll get into why that is, and there may be multiple reasons. One of my theories was that it was stiff gastroc, lacking dorsiflexion, foot everts, and you're toeing off that knuckle instead of your big toe, which I do think is a thing. But I think there's a secondary mechanism, and it's if you look at the majority of shoes, you've got that tapered toe box, so it naturally pushes your big toe inward. And if you just
same with tight socks, man. Tight socks are pulling you together too.
Why not? I mean, sure, over time, your body's going to adapt whatever position you put in for long periods of time. So anyways, so with that position, and there's more elements to that, which I'll get into in a second. So if you probably have to Google, if you're listening to this, Google what that muscle is, abductor hallucis. If you were to push that big toe inward towards the second toe, you could picture how you put strain, or you tension that muscle and strangle that artery that supplies the fascia. Right.
Wow.
Right. So this makes perfect sense. Right. So now what we're dealing with is a necrotic situation, not an inflamed situation. You're cutting off the blood supply of the fascia, the ligament, and it dies, or parts of it die at least. I'm sure there's some redundancy. There's probably other parts that get some blood flow, but clearly you're killing off some of that tissue. So let's get into the shoe wear. So the average quote unquote running shoe which is actually really a fashion shoe, not a running shoe, has got an elevated.
Yeah, we definitely, I do want to have, at the end of this, we're definitely gonna have another shoe conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got an elevated heel, right? You've got an elevated front end, which is called toe spring, and you got a tapered toe box. And when you think of that position,
just so you guys know what he means by tapered toe box. I know you said it before, but just like how every shoe you see is pointed at the top. All these shoes, like if you look at your foot, it's pretty much, it goes out wider as you go towards the toes, but all shoes, they get more narrow towards the top. So that's what he means by the tapered toe box. Yeah.
And the majority of people's feet, if you look at it, like they're widest at the balls of the feet. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be widest at the tips of your toes. Like all you have to do is like look at your baby footprints. They're good. The big toe and the pinky are gonna be the widest part of your foot.
Yeah. So, and personal anecdote here, I personally have some adduction going on in my big toe. If I continued to go the way I was going, I would develop a giant bunion. It's a little one now, but I'll definitely be able to manage it going forward. But I bought my first pair of Vivo Barefoots, which is a very minimalist shoe. I wear them all the time. Love walking in them. They feel incredible. That's what I work out in. But I put them on, and I have this giant, and I still do. I have this giant gap between my big toe and the edge of the shoe. So where they're saying like this is where your toe should be, mine's not even close. So just as an example, I'm only 25, and I've already had that much damage through the years of wearing the wrong footwear.
Yeah, and I've been wearing flip flops for like a decade at least. Like I almost never
And
wear
you have very
shoes.
wide, like splayed out toes.
Yeah, and now I'm like, sweet, this is awesome. So, actually, I went to Miami a couple weeks ago. And it was like the first time I put on a pair of shoes in like a month or something like that. Anyway, so where was it going? So if you look at that typical shoe with the elevated heel, taper toe box, and toe spring, that is puts you in a position of relative plantar flexion, so kind of like stepping on a gas pedal, and big toe extension, so toes kind of pointing up, which is, by the way, not natural. You don't. That's not what you want. And when the majority of my patients I see, they come in and their foot is naturally, when they just relax on the table or their feet are hanging off the edge there, that's the exact position their foot's in: plantar flex, big toe extended. So what that means is that all the toe flexors are like lengthened or put on strain, probably also contributing to what we were talking about with the dying of the plantar fascia. And the big the toe extensor tendons are like super prominent on the top of their foot, and sometimes they'll even get like top of the foot pain, just because they're just in that position. So their toe extensors are outpowering the toe flexors. So theoretically, tight toe extensors, weak toe flexors. Is that all making sense so far?
Yep.
Okay. Of course, then there's the development of tight calf because the elevated heel. So this is just a really bad position for the foot to be in. That's what got me to thinking. And by the way, this is my thought, not Dr. Ray's or Aaron Horschig. So if anyone's to be controversial about this, I'm going to own it. The Javiana flip flop that I wear is very flat. There is a slight degree of elevation, very slight. So it's pretty much flat. So it takes care of the stiffness in the gastroc and the lack of dorsiflexion, right? Your foot is allowed to lay flat. Your big toe is allowed to lay flat. So that should take care of some of that big toe extension that tends to develop. And more than that, your feet are allowed to stay nice and wide and splayed, your toes, I mean. And lastly, you may even have to push slightly down on the flip flop to keep it on your foot. So maybe you're activating the toe flexors. So I'm not saying that a flip flop is like awesome for everybody. I was just thinking if someone's got this pattern of like toes rammed together, toe extension, plantar flexion, that maybe, just maybe, this might counteract some of that. That was
man,
my thinking.
you're kind of killing me right now, because this is another moment where you gain new knowledge, and all of a sudden you look at what you do on a day-to-day basis and you can't do it anymore. I'm seriously thinking I might be wearing flip-flops all the time, because I like the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I put on socks. Now my socks are like super loose, they're like dress socks. My general philosophy on shoes, and I'm thinking of even changing this again, is I just wear Vivos in the gym and I wear Chuck Taylors like everywhere else because I like the look and they're nice and flat. But Chuck Taylors even have a pointed toe box. So I'm
yes,
like, Vivos have casual wear shoes that look pretty good. Vivos lace, maybe it's not like how they lay flat. It's just, those particular shoes don't look very good, but they have other like casual wear shoes, which I'm considering getting instead of, wearing Chuck Taylors. But at the same time, it's like, most of the time I can be wearing flip flop. I can do whatever I want. I own my own company. But like most of the time I could be wearing flip flops. And I definitely think that extra toe extension to keep the shoe on my foot is what I need to have better toe off, because I have terrible toe off.
Wait, are you saying toe extension or toe flexion?
Toe extension.
So toe extension is what you're trying. If you have plantar fasciitis, you're probably trying to get away from that. Do you know what I mean? So this might be one of those things.
I just mean plantar flexion.
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't that extension?
So plantar flexion of the big toe.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
is that extension?
That's toe flexion.
That's toe flexion.
Yes.
So I apologize, everybody. Go back. I want you to go back like 15 seconds, whatever you got to do, and just input me saying flexion instead of extension. But yes, I need to improve my toe flexion.
Yeah.
And that added little cue to keep the shoe on my foot is probably a great way to do it.
Yeah, and maybe this is a call to action for somebody to do some research on this. This is totally theoretical. Maybe it just depends on how you keep your flip flop on your foot too. So that's how I do it. Maybe some people point their toes up to keep it on. I'm not really sure.
You kind of have to push down. That was always the thing I didn't like about it. but I probably didn't like it so much because I'm so terrible at toe flexion.
Probably. Yeah, it's amazing how many stiff big toes I see out there in the world. And it's amazing how many people I look, they come into the office and they got a hole in the top of the right where the big toe is, like the big toe is trying to point out. And I'm like, that's a problem right there. So okay, so let's go into the rice thing and why it's probably completely wrong. So first of all,
did we complete our plantar fasciitis conversation?
No, that's what I'm kind of going into, is like what to do about it now. So first of all,
okay,
the diagnosis of fasciitis is probably wrong. It's not inflamed. It's probably dying or dead, right?
That's such a mindset shift.
I know.
But now think of so many other things that might be necrosis that are labeled as inflammation.
Right. So, okay. So first of all, the diagnosis of fasciitis is probably the wrong word. Fasciosis is probably what you should be saying, which is to imply a dead tissue. So now you've got an arch that's no longer supported by a ligament. So you've sort of destabilized your foot and you've got a tissue that's dying. So what do we do? So resting something that's dying, probably not a good idea, because you want to get some blood flow to something that's dying, right? You don't want to like have less blood supply. Icing it, so now you're blocking the inflammatory process that would probably heal it, so probably the last thing you'd want to do. Compressing it, again, why would you cut off blood supply to a tissue that's dying? Right? Elevate it, same thing. You're not gonna, I don't think compression elevation can have a drastic change, but I don't think they're gonna do anything positive. They could potentially inhibit some healing.
Right. Yeah, and it's a matter of degrees here too, right?
Right.
Is it going to do that much damage? Probably not. But is it going to help at all? No. And it's probably going to do something worse. So don't do it.
Yeah.
Just get away from it. One thing to know here is a terrible thing that a doctor did for my parents. Both of my parents got plantar fasciitis at like different times.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor had them wear a boot when they slept.
Oh, don't get me started on walking boots.
It was a full-on walking boot.
Yeah.
All 8 hours of the night.
Yeah. At least it's probably keeping their foot in a flattened position. So if they've adopted that foot position that I'm talking about, maybe there's something to it, but I don't know. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, that was the reasoning behind it. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, that's not solving any problems.
No. So
you're getting plantar fasciitis mostly because your foot is immobile. Now you're mobilizing it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to point out something very interesting. I heard Dr. Ray say too, was that some people are like, well, I wear the same shoes in both feet. Why do I have it in one foot? Yeah, well, some people definitely get it in both feet, like your parents, right?
I think my dad only got it in one foot too.
Yeah. So he said that he noticed a pattern of people, because not everyone's symmetric, right? So if you have one toe a little longer or one foot a little longer, that's the one that's going to tend to develop plantar fasciitis, because that same muscle, the abductor hallucis, is being pulled even more taut in that position. I thought that was super interesting.
Now, when we talk about like a long-term solution to this, does it look very similar to our bunion solution, where it's, okay, we need to mobilize the ankles, we need to mobilize the fascia of the foot, we need to strengthen these areas? Does it look pretty similar to that, or is it different?
Yeah, similar. I would say,
of course, we talked about flip-flops, which actually might work, but beyond that,
again, theoretical, I don't know. But I would say you got to look at all the dysfunctions and correct them. So first of all, let's start from the end. So your big toe is in extension, so it's elevated, meaning your extensors of your toes are stiff, so you're gonna have to stretch them the opposite way. So that's kind of like, I've done a lot of like tib anterior stretches that kind of work for this. Picture yourself in a kneeling position with like your laces down, you know what I mean? So your feet are very plantar flexed. And then you like basically lift your knee up with your hand and puts a mean stretch in the whole front compartment of your top of your foot and shin. And then like with the toes curled would be even better. That'd be a good way to stretch that. Mm-hmm. And then you want to strengthen the opposite side. So the toe flexors, that's where, my thought was with the flip flops, but you could do things like towel drags, pick up marbles, just generally using your feet. I just tell people, walk barefoot, like pick up your clothes on the ground with your toes, like use your toes. Mm-hmm. And then you would want to get some dorsiflexion back. So you would probably want to mobilize ankle dorsiflexion. Um, I'd be a little tenuous with just general calf stretching because you're going to stretch that plantar fascia a little also. So that's something that it's already kind of destabilized. I'm not sure if I'd want to lengthen that, but I would definitely do some dorsiflexion mobilization. So think of more like a soleus type stretch, or like that dorsiflexion I do on a ball that I love. I think that's going to
Yeah.
kind of,
So just to, so that people know, do more bent knee calf stretches than straight knee calf stretches would be your general prescription.
I think so. I don't know 100%. I think it's going to totally depend on the person and how severe they are. I do think it's okay to, like, massage the fascia and the muscles of the foot. I think there's anything to desensitize is probably fine. And then, yeah, I'd be working a lot on medial lateral strength, toe intrinsics, anything to stabilize that arch. So that would be my general prescription.
Yeah, I think that's all great. And the other thing people have to realize too, I'll be honest, I actually have had a few clients that have had plantar fasciitis, and the actual intense fasciitis can go away pretty quickly, like in a matter of weeks to maybe a couple of months with a lot of this work. But these other things we're speaking of, like if you have a bunion that's developing, if you have a big toe that's immobile and is pushed in all the other toes, that's going to take a long time to revert, and it might not get fully back to like a splayed out foot by the end of your days. But you'll definitely be making improvements, and really stick with it with the plantar fasciitis, because plantar fasciitis is debilitating. Like, it sucks. I've had people who've experienced it, and it's really, really not good. But it can go away within a matter of a few weeks.
Okay. Yeah. I had a case of it once too, right when I was starting grad school, actually. Yeah. I don't know what caused it. And actually, there's something called like medical student syndrome where
Oh,
you're like,
you had plantar fasciitis?
yeah, I had it once, and it was like a day or two. And I always describe it as like, it feels like you're stepping on a saute pan. It's like searing hot. But the thing is, it's so weird as a grad student in PT school, you're learning about all these issues, then like you suddenly develop a case of it just for like a few hours. It's a weird thing. You just absorb it.
Just as a little test.
Yeah, it's like a pseudo pain. It's really weird. So the other thing that Dr. Ray says, which I was a little floored at, and I think is awesome, is that he says that you can actually correct a bunion without surgery.
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, with all this in mind, it makes sense. It's just a malposition of that joint. You reset the joint into the correct position, a more like linear, neutral position. That protrusion of the bone might go away to some degree.
Yeah, to some degree, and especially like to the degree which you need surgery still. You could probably get it away from that. You might, because we talked about, isn't part of it also ossification? Like you're adding bone to that outside area.
Yeah. So I would think, like, how chronic is this? This is going on for like 40 years. You probably have some significant, ossification there, and maybe that part won't go away, but you might reduce it by just putting the joint into a better position.
Yep.
So I did a video on like toe separation. I got this from Kit Laughlin's Physio. I think he's out in Australia. Where you basically lace I'll put this in the show notes, a video. You lace your fingers in between your toes. So your fingers become like toe spacers, and you go one hand over the top, and then you kind of twist your foot back and forth. Spend a couple minutes a day doing that just to separate the toes. Dr. Ray does sell corrective toes, which are just toe spacers you wear. I'm probably going to purchase some myself.
Yeah, and you can get toe spacers just on Amazon for like $10. My mom's got them. I got a pair.
Yep.
Go to the gym and go shoeless and just have them. If you don't want to have your like bare foot on the ground, just wear your socks and the toe spacers in there, and you should be good to go.
Yeah. I mean, just be conscious of the fact that you have toes. I feel like so many people, it's like,
I don't know why it's
almost
so funny.
It's just like, it just seems like toes are like this accident, like the whole foot, just like ram it in this shoe and let's just hope the shoe does all the work for us. And I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing.
Well, yeah, there's even this picture that I posted on the thread that I wrote about why you shouldn't ice your injuries, and it's a picture of LeBron James. He's on the USA Olympic team, and he's covered in ice, like his shoulders, his knees, everything, his ankles. But he's barefoot, and you see his toe, and his toe is just jammed. It's like at a 45-degree angle into the whole rest of his foot. But But that's those basketball players, man. They're wearing those super tight basketball shoes and they're just jumping and jumping and jumping all the time.
Yeah.
They have it worse than anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they develop knee pain. What a surprise, right? I mean, we've been over that, how knee pain is really ankle issues. But I saw somewhere online, I saw really cool. It was a image of someone's foot in a, like a running shoe. And it was
so we need to pause for a second because your daughter Sophie is being hilariously cute right now. She's got her little head like on his shoulder and her little face is just poking out. It's hilarious.
She's super cute. Yeah. So yeah, you can probably Google this like image of a foot in a running shoe. It looks like rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, it's just a mashed, disgusting foot.
Yep.
So, all right, my daughter's all over me now. Is there anything else you want to discuss on this? Do we cover everything?
I think we covered it. Obviously, I don't think we got to speak about shoes quite enough. We can definitely have another conversation. I think if we haven't had a big shoe conversation, which I think we have.
Yeah, I think we have a number of times.
But yeah, if you haven't listened to those episodes, go back, listen to the Bunion episode, go back and listen to our shoe episode if those things are two separate things. And then listen to this episode again and just really appreciate the fact that your foot is something that's supposed to be moving.
Yeah, I mean, spend a little time barefoot at least. I would say if you've been wearing a shoe for like 30 years, like don't just go run out of the gate, go like, that's it, I'm done with shoes. Like if you go from like always in an elevated shoe to nothing, you're going to have some pain just in the transition. So you have to sort of, ramp into it. So maybe that means walk around the house a little bit barefoot and then maybe spend Saturdays barefoot, slowly accumulate some time being barefoot, don't just go flying out of the gate. But
one quick thing I'll say before we jump off is there's a huge difference in the force you have to put down when you go to run if you're in a pair of like thick running shoes versus a pair of like Vivos, which are super thin. And you can hear it. Like go on a run in your pair of, Brooks high-heeled Saucony or whatever type of running shoe you have. And then go on a run in a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes or like a Vibram 5 Fingers and just listen.
Yeah.
You can go the same cadence and there is 2x less force that you have to put down because you don't have to overcome the cushion and you can literally hear it. You're like silent running in the minimalist shoes.
Yeah. I mean, that's like why ninjas wear like those little slippers, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cause it's like your foot's like trying to find the ground. It's trying to get some feedback. And if you're running on like a pillow, it's like push down harder, find the floor,
Yep.
So it makes sense. Okay, John.
All right, well, I'll definitely let you go at this point because I think she just punched the microphone.
She did. All right. Yeah, we'll continue. I'll talk to you soon, John.
All right, man. I'll talk to you. Bye.
Do you have unexplained pain? Or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great way to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's liver function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It's sent to you with free shipping, and you get results in 2 to 5 days, no physician referral needed. Use the code DPT20 for 20% off. Go to letsgetchecked.com and use the code DPT20. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions you want answered, find us on Instagram at Motus Naples or send us an email. You can fill out a contact form on our website, which is motusnaples.com. Make sure to check out our blog and our shop as well, where there are downloadable programs that we'll continue to update. This is the Move with Motus podcast. We'll see you next week.